Hey, I'm Eric. I'm listening to 100 albums in 100 days. For all the details on what I'm doing and why, check out my video pinned in my profile. Today I listened to, well, I actually listened to two albums, but the one I was supposed to listen to was a 1983 album, Hell Hath No Fury, from the band Rock Goddess. So I had never heard these guys or heard of these guys before. This was a suggestion from a friend for an album to add to the list. I had never heard anything about them or heard of them or anything. Turns out they're an all-female power metal trio that was really surprisingly good. So, like I said, it came out in '83. When I first started listening to it, the first thing I thought was they sound very British. They sounded really like straight out of the late '70s, early '80s new wave of British heavy metal acts. And so, like I do for every album, I was reading up on the band and the album while I was listening, and lo and behold, they're from the UK, and they came out. They started late '70s, early '80s. They were grouped in with that group of bands that is referred to as the new wave of British heavy metal. People like Saxon and Judas Priest and all those guys. And that's really what they sound like. The album I listened to first is really what they sound like. The album was very underproduced. There wasn't a lot of. It was just straight them playing their instruments, and there was no for lack of a better term, there's no production to it. It sounded great. It wasn't like they were, recording on a boombox in the garage, but it just didn't have a lot of production value to it. But the songs were still really good. It was a good album. While I was reading about the album, the band, and I just happened to look on Spotify. So that album came out in '83. They put out a second album in '83. So when I got done with this one, and that one's just called Rock Goddess. When I got done with this one, I just gave the other one a listen, because what band puts out two albums in 1 year, full albums? It's not, one wasn't like an EP and the other was a full album. They were both chock full of songs. So the album Rock Goddess sounds more like they came off the Sunset Strip. It really sounded more like, and I'm going to make some obscure references. So if you're not a big heavy metal fan, '80s metal fan, you probably won't get this. That Rock Goddess album sounded like Ratt's first EP that came out before, Out of the Cellar. It sounded very Sunset Strip. The guitars were amazing. So on both albums, the girl that sings, I think she plays guitar too. She has got a voice. She could probably sing most of Judas Priest catalogs. She's got an incredible voice, very rough, but she can sing very, I guess, quote unquote normal, for lack of a better term. But she can also kick it in and get that growl going. She's an incredible singer. I don't know who was playing guitar on the second album I listened to, but the solos on there, the guitar work sounded like, really reminded me of AC/DC, is what it really reminded me of. But like I said, it sounded more Sunset Strip than it did new wave of British heavy metal. So I don't know which one came first. I don't know if one of those albums came out like an independent release and then they got signed and the other one came out. I don't know what happened. Two very different sounding albums in the same year. There was a couple of songs that crossed over onto the albums. That's what leads me to think they put one out by themselves and then got signed and then re-released another album. Both of the albums, not to be, well, I'm just going to say it. There weren't a lot of female acts in the early '80s as metal went. And I was just thoroughly impressed with the way they played and sang, and the guitar work. They had another album in '87. It was only released in France. So there was never another US or UK release. I would have loved to hear these guys mature, grow in their craft and mature, because I think they would have been ridiculously good. They got together when they were teenagers, and if I read right, that first album they recorded, like their bass player couldn't even go play gigs because she was underage. I would have loved to hear them play or grow and mature in their craft and put on another album, which they never did. Both of these albums are really good. So if you're a 80s metal fan, or if you're a British heavy metal fan, if you like the early 80s metal like I do, all that stuff that came out before the bands hit big, that's what this sounds like, and that's what it feels like. They're worth a listen. They really are. They're just both of them are severely underproduced, even though one has more production than the other, if that makes any sense at all. But yeah, it's almost a shame. So they put another album out like in I want to say 2000, maybe 2009. They put another album out. I didn't get a chance to listen to it, so I don't know what that's like. Hopefully it's just as good as this, or hopefully it's even better. But I read they finally broke up, and they're no longer. You can tell they didn't get a fair shake, because I didn't even know who they were. I had never heard of them. But I will say this. So as far as, and they reminded me of a more modern group. Well, let me wrap that up. I would suggest, if you like 80s metal, if you like obscure bands, if you're really into the new wave of British heavy metal, that early Def Leppard, and Saxon and Judas Priest, early Priest, and all those bands, this fits right in with them. These guys could have played, festivals with those bands and held their own. That's how good it is. Lately, though, and this is who they reminded me of when I was looking at the album covers and listening to the band. There's a newer band that's been around for, I don't know, I want to say 2 or 3 years, maybe a little longer than that. They're called Plush, and they're a 4-piece all-girl band that just put a new album out. Pretty recently, and I listened to it pretty regularly, and it is really good. So, 2 suggestions: go check out Rock Goddess, because they were legit, and it's a travesty that they didn't get more of a chance to prove that. And while you're out there, check out a band called Plush, because they are ridiculously good as well. And I would recommend their album immediately. Any of their stuff, you can go find them on YouTube, find them on Spotify, whatever you can find for Plush. Look them up too, because they are incredible. If you listen to any of these albums, either one of the Rock Goddess albums or one of the Plush albums, let me know what you think.